Today, class, we're going to learn about solving quadratics by completing the square, which is a very useful method for solving quadratic equations. You should be paying strict attention right now. And so if I want to find out what value of x, there's other ways to do this. We solve this by factoring. But another way to do it is by completing the square. And so there's different ways to solve quadratic equations. One is by graphing. One is by completing the square. One is by trying to take the square root of both sides. But one that will always work is called completing the square. And the reason that it's called completing the square is because if you take a square, where's the square? That's the square. And you draw it. And you draw some lines through the square. Not white lines, those aren't going to show up very well. Let's make them solid lines. And if I were to make some boxes in this square like this, okay? Over here, if I wanted to break this apart, I could have an x and an x. And if this is truly a square, how can I break apart this 8x into two equal pieces?
All right, so I think we saw some people thinking around. We need to have you pay attention to this.
So one way this can be thought of, solving quadratics, is by, it's a square. And I could break this, and someone told me, how could I break this 8x apart into 4x and 4x? And so here's my x squared. And then I can think of it, there's 4x here, and there's 4x here. Okay? Right, so I have x squared plus 8x. And the way I would get that, you remember from before, what would have to be up here? X times what would give you 4x? 4. And what goes here? 4. 4. Right? Okay. Now, what am I missing right here in this square? 16. There's a 16. Okay? But you kind of look at this and you say, well, there is no 16 over here, right? And so really what I'm doing is I'm writing x squared. So I'm going to rewrite this as x squared plus 8x plus something. What is that something that I've added?
16.
A 16 equals, but if I add 16 to this side, what do I need to add to this side?
0.
No. You have to add 16 to this side. So basically what I'm doing is I'm adding 16 to both sides. All right? When I complete the square, I'm adding something. But the reason I did this is because I can rewrite x squared plus 8x plus 16 as x plus 4 times x plus 4. See that? Okay? So now I have x plus 4 squared, which is x plus 4 times x plus 4, would give me this. That's equal to this side, which is 16. Now you do algebra to solve this. Okay? So to solve this, and I'll go through, this is just kind of where it comes from, and then I'll go through some more examples of solving this by completing this first, but I'm kind of trying to show you where it comes from. Okay? So how do I get rid of this square here? Anyone remember? How do I get rid of a square? What's the opposite of squaring something? Square rooting it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to square root both sides of this, remembering that when I square root both sides, I have to have both a plus and a minus over here, because negative square root of 16 times negative square root of 16, or negative 4 times negative 4 will give you 16. And so we'll positive 4 and positive 4. So I have to have a plus or minus. And when I square root something squared, I just end up with that thing by itself. X plus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 16. And what is the square root of 16? 4. And now I solve these two independent equations. One says x plus 4 equals positive 4, or x plus 4 equals negative 4. Right? This says x plus 4 equals plus 4. Or, so this is not just plus or minus, it's two different equations. It's really what this plus or minus means. And then just use algebra to get this x by itself, subtract 4 from both sides, and I get x equals 0, or x equals, when I subtract 4 from this side, what do I get? What's minus 4 minus 4? It's negative 8, okay? And to check that that works, I would plug it in. If I plug in 0 in here, 0 plus 0 does equal 0, so that checks. And negative 8 squared is 64, right? And 8 times negative 8 is negative 64. And so 64 plus negative 64 would give you 0. So both of those answers can check out, okay? Now, how do you do a problem if they say solve by completing the square? So let's look at one that works out nicely, okay? So solve by let's do a y squared. Y squared minus 4y. And some of you say, this is dumb, I could just do this in my head really quick. But it gets more complex, all right? And so what you want to do, the method that you use is take this, the coefficient in front of the y is a. Remember that? And the coefficient, in front of the y squared is a. And the coefficient up here is b. What you want to do is take half of b. What's half of b? Negative 2. Okay? So the way I want to rewrite this is y minus half of whatever the coefficient of the y term is. Okay? So you're going to split this in half. And you're going to call that y minus 2 squared. Okay? But in doing that, I added something to the equation. Who could tell me what I added to the equation? What did I add? Foil this out. If it helps you, foil this out. Y minus 2 times y minus 2 is, it's first, which is y squared, outer, which is minus 2y, inner, which is also minus 2y. Minus 2 times minus 2 is the last. What does that give you? Plus 4, right? So here's my minus 4y, but so I have y squared minus 4y, but by rewriting this as this, what have I added to this side of the equation? How much have I added to this side of the equation when I did this? Well, how much? 4. Okay? So what you need to do to keep this is not exactly the same as this. This is 4 more than this. So to keep the equation in balance, right, this is a little scale, what do I need to put on this side of the equation? 4. Okay, so you need to put a 4 on this side. Okay? So that's like so you took half of this, and then you add that thing squared to this side of the equation. Now I solve it. I take the square root of both sides. So I'm going to square root this, which gives you y minus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 4. And what is the square root of 4? What's the square root of 4? 2. Plus or minus 2. So one solution is y minus 2. One equation is equal to positive 2. Or y minus 2 equals negative 2. And then you solve those two things independently. This one, you add 2 to both sides, right? And you get y equals 4. Or I add 2 to both sides, and I get y equals 0. So the answer isn't always 4 and 0 or 3 and or 6 and 0, whatever it was. But these are, they come up, this is one particular type of equation where the answers are this and 0. And if we factor that out, we'd see that that's true too. Okay? But now we're going to boost it up a notch. Ready? Done with that? We're good? Okay. Everyone's done copying down what you need to copy down? Copy down. Okay. So we're going to do another one. Solve by completing the square. Oops, 12x plus 5 equals 138. So you'll see why I made this. I made up this problem so it would work out. And I think it works out. I was kind of tired last night when I was making it up, but I think it should work. Who wants to guess what I should do first? Good. Okay. Very good, Morgan. So the first thing you want to do is get this with just x's on one side. So what Morgan said to do is absolutely right. I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. So you want to get the right side to just be a number, a constant term, and you want the left side to just have variables on it. Okay? Equals 133. All right? Now I want to do the completing the square thing. All right? So I'm going to rewrite this in parentheses, and I'm going to take half of the second term. Okay? So what is half of the coefficient of the second term? What's half of negative 12? Negative 6. So I just write this as minus 6 squared. Except when I did this, I added something to this equation. How much did I add? What's negative 6 times negative 6? 36. Not 12, 36. So I've added this much. Do you see that? Because if I FOILed this out, I would get exactly the same as this, except there'd be another 36 in there, my two last terms. So what this is, if I FOIL this out, I would get x squared minus 12x plus 36. And that's almost the same as this, except there's an extra 36 in here. So I need to add into the right side of my equation an extra 36. See that? That? And so now I'm going to combine those terms. So I get x minus 6 squared equals 169. Then what? How do I get rid of a squared? Square root it. Okay, so I'm going to square root both sides. I'm going to take the square root of this side and take the square root of that side. I'm going to remember to put a plus or minus there. And square root of x minus 6 squared is just x minus 6. And who knows what the square root of 169 is? Come on, and it's a perfect square. 13. Okay? If you didn't know that, you could use your calculator. So now, what you get is either x minus 6 equals positive 13 or x minus 6 equals negative 13. And then I solve these two equations independently. Add 6 to that side, add 6 to that side. I get x equals 19. And over here I add 6 to that side, add 6 to that side. And I get x equals negative 7. So these two are your two answers to this quadratic equation. So if I plug 19 in there, I would get that that's equal to 138. I bet you $1 it would work. Or $100. If I didn't, no, I wouldn't bet you $100. I don't know. And negative 7, because I might have made a mistake. if I put negative 7 in there, I would also get 130. And that's called completing the square. But I'm not quite done yet. Because sometimes this number over here is not a perfect square. Okay? So that's kind of, it's sad but true. But we're going to do one where it's not a perfect square. You ready? Take notes, yo, silly. Okay. X squared, solved by completing the square. X squared minus 20x plus 32 equals 0. Okay? And solve, and I say solve by completing the square. Solve by completing the square. And this, you kind of have to know how to do it. I could write all the rules and all the steps, which I probably will. But still, the best way to learn how to do this is by doing it lots of times. Practice. And you say, oh, I remember, by completing the square. Unfortunately, tonight I'm only giving you 5 homework problems. So you should be able to get some practice, all right? So who can tell me what to do first? Go ahead.
Make a square. The square.
Not yet. Good. Well, you want to get this 32. Any constant terms have to go by themselves. So I'm going to bring the constant term, which is the 32, and I'm going to bring it over. X squared minus 20x, this goes away, equals negative 32. Now I do the completing the square part. Okay? I take half of this. What's half of negative 20? Negative 10. So I rewrite this as x minus 10 squared. But I've added something. How much have I added? Huh? 100. All you have to do is look at this last number and square it, and that's how much I've added. If it's negative, it's still adding, right? Because a negative times a negative will make a positive. And so all I've done is I've added 100 to both sides. Or I've added 100 over here when I completed the square. So in order to keep my equation in balance, okay, on the scale, I have to add 100 to this side. Now I simplify. X minus 10 squared equals 68. And then I take the square root of both sides. So I square root this, and I square root this, not forgetting that I need a plus sign or a minus sign. And when I square root x minus 10 squared, I get x minus 10 equals plus or minus the square root of 68. Okay? And now you break it into 2 parts. You say that means that either x minus 10 equals positive the square root of 68, or x minus 10 equals negative the square root of 68. And then I need to get the 10 over onto the left side. Okay? How do I get the 10 over to the left side? How do I get this 10 over to here? Huh? Add 10. I'm going to add 10 to here and add 10 to here. Now, usually just by mathematical convention, you want to put that 10 in front of the square root of 68. So it's 10 plus the square root of 68. And the reason you do that is so that you don't think that the square root is over the 10 as well. And over here, I'm going to add 10 and add 10. Whoops, I should say 68, not 64. Okay, so I'm going to add 10, and that makes this go away. And I get x equals 10 minus the square root of 68. And that's called an exact answer. Now, you might want a rounded off answer. So if I take my calculator and I do the square root of 68, okay, clear, I'm going to go second square root of 68. I get that that's about 8.25. So square root of 68 is approximately 8.25. So if they said round to the nearest tenth or something like this, you would round up to 8.3, about 8.3. So x would be about 10 plus 8.3, which is about 18.3. Or x is about 10 minus 8.3, which is about 1.7. Okay? So those would be two answers that are approximate. This would be exact. If they say leave your answer exact as a square root, you will leave it like that. If not, you would round off to the nearest tenth, and you get something like that. And again, all this is the places where this particular parabola would cross the x-axis. So it's going to cross at 18.3, or it's going to cross over here at 1.7. So those are two places where it's going to be equal to 0, because that's kind of what it's asking you. You ready for a you try? Can we try you try, Ms. Lindgren?
Yeah.
You try. Okay. So here we go. You try. Hey, you try. X squared plus 6x plus 3 equals 0. Solve by completing. I might change this. I'm not going to change it. I'm going to leave it just like it is. Solve by completing the square. We're going to, let's erase this messy mark that I just made. I'm going to get rid of that. There we go. So let's see if Sarah's right. So the first thing I want to do is take this 3 away from both sides. I'm going to go kind of fast. X squared plus 6x equals negative 3. Get rid of that. Now I'm going to complete the square. Take half of that 6. X plus 3 squared equals negative 3. And in completing the square, how much have I added? How much have I added? What's this squared? What's 3 squared? It's 9. So I've added 9. Okay? So I get x plus 3 squared equals negative 3 plus 9, which is 6. And then I have to take the square root of both sides. So I get x plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 6. And then you subtract the 3 from both sides. I'm going to subtract the 3 here and subtract the 3 here. This makes this go away. And I get, oh, I should have broken it into two equations. X plus 3 equals positive root of 6, or x plus 3 equals negative root of 6. Subtract 3, subtract 3, subtract 3, subtract 3. So this gives me x equals negative 3 plus square root of 6. And this equals x equals negative 3 minus the square root of 6. And that's how you do those two. Okay? So I think I'm going to let you try to struggle through some of these. Page 544, homework is page 544, 8 through 18 evens. All right? And I'm going to write the steps on here. Should I write the steps on the board?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay? So we're going to do that in a minute. I'm going to write the steps.